He's a god, a prince, a king. But if you take away the hammer, the cape, and the throne, what's actually left? Today we are diving deep into the story of Thor, the god of thunder who had to rediscover his purpose in life with every step he took. The story of Thor in the MCU is a continuous process of loss. From a mere throne to one's whole civilization, Thor lost more than any other hero. But he never stops in his tracks and quits. He keeps going on because
that's what heroes do.
In the beginning, Thor is the ultimate legacy hire. He's a guy who thinks his power is a birthright rather than a responsibility. To him, being worthy just means being the strongest guy in the room. When Odin strips him of his power and tosses him to earth, it's not just a punishment, it's a deconstruction. Thor is a fish out of water comedy, sure, but it's also the first time Thor has to learn that worthiness isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about willing to die for people who can do nothing for you. He learns to be a hero, but he hasn't quite learned how to be a man yet. This phase in Thor's life was more of an introduction to the ether and is one of the most overlooked movies in the Infinity Saga. But this is when Thor starts losing the important parts of his life, starting with Frigga. I would like to call this the beginning of Thor's journey to being what he becomes at the end of the Infinity Saga. For a long time, Thor's identity was tied to his stuff, his hammer, his hair, his kingdom. Then Ragnarok happens. Ragnarok is the colorful movie. Look closer, it's a horror movie for Thor. He loses his father, his weapon, his eye, and eventually his entire planet. This is where the narrative asks the big question. Are you the god of hammers or the god of thunder? He realizes that Asgard isn't a place, it's a people. He finally accepts the throne, not because he wants the glory, but because his people have no one else. He finally becomes the king he was meant to be. Then comes Thanos. Till that moment, Thor had not failed in saving his people. This is where he faces his biggest fear, failure. He loses almost every Asgardian and watches his brother Loki get killed by Thanos.
What more could I lose?
By the time he hits Endgame, Thor is suffering from the most realistic depiction of PTSD and depression we have seen in a superhero movie. The fat Thor look was played for laughs by the characters in the movie, but for the audience, it was a visual representation of a man who had given up because fighting was too much to bear. He didn't just lose a fight, he lost his sense of purpose. The most important scene in Thor's entire arc isn't a fight. It's a conversation with his mom in 2013. When Thor realizes he can still summon the hammer despite his failure and his depression, it changes everything. It proves that worthiness isn't a state of perfection, it's a state of intent.
I'm still worthy.
In the end, Thor does the bravest thing any of the Trinity did. He admits that he doesn't want to be king. He realizes that being who you're supposed to be is a prison. By joining the Guardians or heading out on his own, he's finally defining himself on his own terms. But as it turns out, finding yourself isn't a one-time event, it's a process. This process continues in the next movie. A lot of people look at Love and Thunder as just a comedy, but beneath the screaming goats, it's actually about Thor's vulnerability and how he's holding up after Endgame. After losing everyone, Thor thinks the only way to stay safe is to keep everyone at a distance. But through Jane, and eventually through a promise to a literal enemy, he realizes that it's better to have a broken heart than to have no heart at all. In the beginning, Thor wanted a throne. In the middle, he wanted revenge. But in the end, he just wants to protect a single child. By adopting Gor's daughter, Thor finally stops being the prince of Asgard and starts being Thor. He isn't defined by his hammer or his crown anymore. He is defined by the love he chooses to give. He went from a god who looked down on mortals to a man who finds his greatest purpose in the simple act of raising one. Tony died to save the world. Steve went back to live his life. But Thor chose to keep on going. His arc is a reminder that you are more than your titles, more than your failures, and definitely more than the tools you use to do your job. He started as a god who thought he was everything, and ended as a man who realized that being just Thor was enough. And with that, the Trinity is complete. Tony, Steve, and Thor, three completely different ways to be a hero. Which of their journeys resonated with you the most? For me, it's always been Thor, mostly because his mistakes feel the most human. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And what character should I talk about next, Clint or Romanoff?